Hey everyone, this podcast is part of Story Mode, the podcast network of Gamefully Unemployed. You can support us and gain access to other great exclusive podcasts at patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. That's patreon.com/GAMEFULLY unemployed, which is spelled like it sounds.
Baby.
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 Oh, hi, everyone.
Hello, everyone's.
My name is David Bell.
My name, for the time being, is Tom Ryman.
And we just watched Cube 2 Hypercube.
Hypercube.
It's the movie America needs right now.
Yes, a movie about being locked in a box where time moves forward relentlessly and you're in no control of it.
The first cube was a formula for death. Unless you cracked the code.
If any of these numbers are prime, then the room is trapped. Oh my god.
But now...
Hello? Anyone here?
terror has a new dimension.
Brilliant movie. Hey, folks.
Listen, it's a Hypercube.
It's a Hypercube.
It's a Hypercube.
It's Thursday, I believe. And so this comes to you from one of our patrons. So I got to give a shout out to Burrito Mouth.
Burrito Mouth!
Is it a burrito in a mouth? Is it a mouth that looks like a burrito?
Or is it a burrito that has a mouth?
Here's what I'm thinking. Like, imagine lips, but they're rolled up like a burrito. So it's not like a tube. It's like someone with their lips are like rolled together like a burrito, and their tongue is the meat. You know?
I think that checks out.
I think that checks out too. Okay, so Burrito Mouth, I believe, is the one who assigned us Cube, and I think in that podcast we talked about Cube 2 Hypercube as being a bad movie.
It is.
Yeah.
It continues to be.
Burrito Mouth went ahead and said, well, watch that movie. And I'm guessing, Tom, that we might have to grapple with Cube 0 at some point.
I've never seen Cube 0. I have heard.
Neither have I.
I have heard that it's a prequel.
Okay.
And B that
Zero.
and B that it's better than Cube 2, which, I mean, trimming my toenails is better than Cube 2. This movie sucks, Dave. I hate it.
This is 2002.
I hate it so much.
Yes, okay. I'm not going to say this is a good movie. I'm not going to say I liked it. My feeling was more frustration because I realized what you can do with cubes. First of all, this is from the director of this. You know what the director of this did?
No.
It's the director of this didn't direct much, but they're the director of photography for American Psycho, Four Rooms, Hackers, and Pulp Fiction. And then they made this Cube 2, Hypercube.
None of those movies are particularly well shot, but kudos to him.
Yeah. Also, like, just because you're a director of photography doesn't mean you can,
Right. Yeah.
This was written by several people. One of which is the writer of the 2011 Conan the Barbarian.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
That's a bad movie.
Yeah. Also, The Crow, Wicked Prayer. Also, The Legends of Hercules, 2014.
No, Hercules. I think
Hercules.
It's Hercules.
And Halloween Resurrection.
Oh, that's the one where Busta Rhymes attaches a car battery to Michael Myers' balls.
Yes.
Which arguably makes it the best Halloween movie.
Yeah. It was also one of the other writers was the producer of American Psycho. What is going on? They're like circling this like group of people.
I think this movie was 2002. American Psycho was 2000, and it was the first big release of Lionsgate. Because no major studio would touch American Psycho.
Yeah, that's fair.
At the time, I guess, but once you watch the movie, you're like, why?
Right.
So I guess these guys must have just come right off of American Psycho, and then Lionsgate was like, you want to make something else for us? And like, yeah, we want to make a sequel to this cool indie sci-fi movie from a few years ago. I imagine that's probably what happened.
Either that or the Lionsgate was like, you need to do Cube 2. We need a Cube 2, and no one wants to do Cube 2. And they're like, all right.
Turns out there's a pretty good reason for that.
Yeah. Well, here's my disappointment. Should we go through the plot? Because the plot's just Cube. The plot
is just Cube, except there's no traps. It's
parts.
Just time is coming for them.
Yeah, it's the same. It's a group of people. We have to rewatch everybody ask the same questions again. Mm-hmm. That was the first mistake, is a group of strangers in a room like, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? Where are we? What do you think it is? Oh, I think it's aliens. Oh, I think one guy thinks it's a reality TV show after he's watched people die, and it's like, what the? Why would you even think that?
I mean, that character's a clown. Like that character doesn't make any sense, and he dies fucking.
Yes, he dies fucking. Two characters die fucking.
Two characters die of old age while fucking.
I'm not sure how that worked.
Time moves so fastly in their cube. They're in like a cube where time moves forward at an incredible rate. So
okay, but here's
I assume when the lady Kate peeks into the room and sees the two mummies suspended in midair fucking. By the way, that doesn't make any sense.
No.
I think she's just seeing how far into the future they've moved. I guess I don't know
because here's the thing. All right, so these two characters who are terrible. They're just like very awkwardly into each other, but it doesn't work. No chemistry. She walks into the room first, right? And she looks back and he's in the doorway, like talking in slow-mo. And then you see his perspective and she's going fast and he walks into the room. And so, yes, they're both in the room where their time is now going fast and they start fucking. But then I assume they stopped fucking and said, let's go to another room.
You would think.
Because, like, that's the weird part, is it's not like they were stuck in that room.
No, they could have moved.
And fucking doesn't take, 80 years to do. Because that's the implication, is that they've been fucking for 80 years in that room.
Even if you're fucking at, like, the speed of, like, fast-forwarding a video, which is kind of what the speed is, that's still, like... that wouldn't carry you 80 years into your life.
Right. I shouldn't say 80 years. They would have starved to death. They would have
right, but they're like mummies. So like
yeah.
It's been like they've been dead for at least a year.
But it means that they must have concluded that they weren't going to leave that room and just fuck over and over again until they died of dehydration.
It's the most baffling thing because these two characters just suddenly give up.
Right.
It doesn't make any sense for who they are. They just decide to start having sex, and then we cut away from them, and then when we cut back to them, they're dead. This movie is like, terribly written.
Remember the movie The Time Machine?
I do.
The classic movie where the bad guy gets thrown out of the time machine, but his hand is still in it. Mm-hmm. So he watches while like holding the guy's hand or something. He watches the rest of his body age. Slowly die?
Yeah, that's actually from the original Time Machine movie, too.
Okay.
Like a Morlock gets kicked out of the time machine, and he watches the Morlock's body, like, degrade in a matter of seconds.
But it dies, right? It dies.
Oh, yeah.
In this, he gets thrown out of the time machine alive.
Mm-hmm.
And what is always funny about that is it's a cool idea, but, like, that means that inside the time machine... He's watching it happen really fast. Outside the time machine, that person is slowly, I assume, starving to death.
It's just standing there for decades.
Right. Not cutting off their own arm. Not doing, like, assuming they're maybe stuck, you could still, like, cut off your arm or something. And that means that's what
like,
this is.
It feels like the reverse would happen. Like, he'd get thrown out of the time machine, and his hand would still be inside it, and then, like, in the blink of an eye, his hand would just be a bone.
Yeah.
Like time wouldn't move fast for him.
Right. And this is kind of the same deal here, is they're trying to make some sort of statement, like, oh, time moved super fast, so while they were fucking, they aged to mummies, and it's like, but that's not how that works.
Mm-hmm. It doesn't make
time
any sense.
moves normal to them.
Yes.
So they wouldn't sit there and fuck until they, unless they were just like, we're gonna fuck until we die in this position.
Everyone else would get old.
Right. Well, they.
Oh no! Wait, no. They're in hyper time. They're in hyper
yeah,
time.
But yeah, what I'm saying is it's weird that they're in hyper time, but for some time would move normal for them, so it wouldn't be like they're fucking and suddenly they're old and mummies. They would unfuck and like continue and maybe leave the room.
Right.
And that's
why
it's weird.
Like,
it doesn't make any sense.
The speed at which they're moving, again, it's like a tape and fast forward. So it would still take them probably over an hour to get through a 24-hour period, even if you're on fast forward. I'm just like guesstimating. Because like if you fast forwarded your way through a 2-hour movie, it would probably still take you about 3 or 4 minutes.
Right, yeah.
Maybe not. Maybe quicker than that. But it's like you wouldn't leap years ahead in the span of time it takes to have sex.
Right, and again, they're not leaping anything. They're in their world. That's what I don't understand. Is their bodies by being in that room, are they dying faster but not aging? Yeah, what's going on?
Right, it's like Interstellar. Like when Matthew McConaughey is on that planet for 7 minutes or however long it is, and then the Earth has moved ahead. Like it's like time isn't moving. He's typically moving fast. Technically moving faster, but like within his own sphere.
Right.
He doesn't
notice
it's
the same amount of time.
Exactly.
So I still don't understand what happened to those fucking couples.
It doesn't make sense.
No, this movie doesn't make sense.
It's just one of many things. The main thing I want to highlight that this movie is terribly, terribly written and acted even worse.
Yep.
The performances in this movie are trash. Yep. The best thing I can do, or like the best thing I can point out to illustrate how bad this movie is that the blind woman is wearing a wristwatch.
Is she?
Yeah. And it's not a digital one, so it's like it wouldn't beep on. It's just a regular, like, old style, like two-handed wristwatch.
Yeah. That's perfect.
Why the fuck is she like it was so glaring to me that I was expecting, because I had only seen this movie once and it was almost 20 years ago.
You're expecting like she's not actually blind.
There was going to be a reveal that she wasn't blind. Nope.
No, she's a super hacker. She's a super hacker.
She's a super hacker, yeah.
Here's the thing. The reason I said I was disappointed is because the Cube movies had one of two ways to be interesting. There's two puzzles, so to speak. There's either the puzzles of the actual booby traps. Making a movie where a group of people have to solve a series of interesting puzzles that are time related would be really cool. It'd be like the Star Trek finale where Picard has to coordinate with his past and future and present self. Mm-hmm. Like a puzzle movie where it's like a series of cool puzzles and the mystery is just watching them solve this shit would be cool. What's not interesting is 90 minutes of people going, who put us in this cube? And that's what they chose to do.
That's all they did. Yeah, you're right. It takes away the element of the first movie where there's traps and they're trying to figure out how to tell if a room is trapped,
how to solve the cube. In this movie, they just wander aimlessly from room to room. Right.
And then at the very end realize that the numbers they've been seeing scrawled all over the walls are a time code. I'm not sure.
It doesn't help them escape. It doesn't help them escape.
And I'm also not even sure I can really articulate how that's possible.
Yep, I can't articulate how the one person gets out of the cube.
She takes one of the wristwatches off of the bad guy who is like aged so much he has gray hair. Like that's how long he's been in the cube.
Yeah,
he's presumably been in the cube for years at this point. And yet when his watch hits what is it, like 6:59 or something? That's when the cube ends. But it's like the cube would have ended twice a day, every day for the past several years that the guy's been stuck in the cube, right?
I guess.
Like, why does it only end when she looks at the watch? Like,
No, that doesn't make any sense.
He is draped in watches at that point because he keeps killing a character and taking his watches for some reason that's never explained.
No, but it is the best part of the movie.
I guess. There's
no good part, but the guy who decides to just randomly cannibalize the Jerry character, who just dies a million deaths, I was like, yeah, fuck Jerry, that's great.
It's so unearned. Like, it's like they were trying to do the same thing they did in the first movie with the Quentin character, but with Quentin, it's like it builds. Like, it's a slow escalation to where you're like, oh, there's something wrong with this guy. And then it's kind of a twist that it turns out like, oh, the guy who said he was a cop and was trying to be the leader and protect people is actually a maniac.
Right, and because the way he's a maniac is he's like this like greater good feeling where he's like, fuck the weak. And the guy literally is just like, I'm a cannibal now.
Right, he just
goes cannibal.
He just becomes a maniac out of nowhere.
Like he claims he's hungry, but they never show like he just suddenly is like, I'm so hungry, and it's like, you've never really been complaining about this earlier.
Yeah, nobody's established that.
Yeah, it's really bad.
It's extremely bad
because the puzzles don't make any sense, and there aren't interesting. There are no puzzles, and what little stuff there is, like the time thing, doesn't matter. They focused on, why are we in here? With all this weird lore that all they can do is talk about. Mm-hmm. Because, again, the only visual thing to do in the cube is solve puzzles. And they decided they weren't smart enough to do that. So they're just sitting there being like, what? They have this old lady with dementia who just is like a exposition factory.
Yeah.
Just dumping, and because she has dementia, it doesn't have to make sense when the exposition comes out. It just needs to be when the writers need it to come out.
Yeah, she's only coherent when the writers need her to be.
Yes, and she gives the specific stuff they need her to give when they need her to give it. It's man, and so we learn that there's like a hacker. Mm-hmm. Named
Alex something.
Yeah, Alex something.
Alex First or something like that.
Yeah, and one of the guys thinks it was the hacker who put them in there. I'm not sure why he thinks that.
It's never clearly said.
Yeah, and they talk about this hacker like he's a legend. And again, who gives a shit?
Right, because when they finally reveal that it's the blind woman, you're like, okay, like, what does that mean? And then she she gets her neck broken like a minute later,
and then she dies, and it's like
that didn't, like, this character didn't matter. Like, none of these things mattered.
Well, that was the big thing, is nothing mattered because they put these twists at the end that are completely unearned. So the movie is centered around this one woman, and she is like she's
essentially the protagonist, yeah.
And she's the most level-headed, and she takes care of... She's the one where, when they're like, leave the blind girl behind, she's the one who won't, and, like, takes care of the woman with dementia.
There's a couple of moments where they really get... Like, again, they're trying to replicate some of the stuff that was in Cube, where they were like... They had the guy who was mentally disabled, and they were arguing, leave him behind. But it was in a situation where they had to climb precariously through a cube, and any noise would trigger this trap.
Yes, in this one, it's a blind woman just has to climb.
Right, she just has to climb, and like half of the characters are like, leave her! It's like, right. Really?
I was watching that and I was thinking, like, I'm pretty sure blind people can climb, right?
Right, like
I don't think that's
it's not that much of an issue. Yeah. It's like, it was just funny that, like, they just randomly, like, nobody is really a terribly consistent character except for maybe poor Jerry.
Yeah, and I love it.
But
because Jerry is also like, hi everybody, I'm Jerry. I'm a great guy.
And then he's the one that gets killed over and over again. He's just an agreeable, nice guy, and he gets the most punishment in this film.
Yeah, I was a big fan of that.
It's everybody just kind of, and this is a big problem I have with The Walking Dead, every character just kind of gets whatever trait or characteristic the writer needs them to have in that particular moment. Like nobody is consistent.
It's also it's inconsistency, and it's also whenever like The Walking Dead had this problem where like it's and a lot of Apocalypse has this issue, but not as bad as The Walking Dead, where it's like realistically humanity is. They tend to, in all like extreme survival situations, tend to band together.
Right.
And it's a version where suddenly everybody's just like, I'm going to be an irrational prick.
Right.
You're making it so much harder because the writers needed conflict.
Right. Really, like you'd only run into like one cannibal every 100 people.
Exactly.
Like everybody wouldn't be...
a fucking maniac.
Just a maniac. Like you might. I don't want to talk about The Walking Dead.
All right.
I was gonna say you might run into a couple of Negans, but like Negan is a dude who's like looking out for his community and he doesn't trust you.
Well, that's the thing, and yes, we're not here to talk about The Walking Dead.
Yeah,
but The Walking Dead does do a good job at like showing up seemingly hard characters. And then the reveal is like, oh, they're acting hard.
Right. He's he's just the same as our guy.
Yeah, and that does make sense. Mm-hmm. But if someone was like truly a maniac, their community would just cast them out or murder them.
They certainly wouldn't put him in charge.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we're
talking about The Walking Dead.
I want to go through the arc of the main lady. So at the end, she quote unquote solves the cube by realizing that the numbers are exact time. That doesn't mean anything. That doesn't help you solve the cube. That just tells you when the cube's going to collapse. But whatever. We
also don't know that until the very, very end.
Yes. But it's meaningless. And so all the cubes start collapsing into one room. She fights off Cannibal Guy. She's everything's like falling apart. She opens like the bottom portal and there's just a black hole and she's like really scared and doesn't know what to do, and then she just jumps through that, and then there's like a psychedelic sequence, and then she's laying in a pool of water. And so how she escaped is unclear. They never explain what just happened.
It seems like they just turned it off.
Yes, but like why did she survive?
Right. Why is nobody else alive? Because we see that there's multiple Jerrys.
Yeah.
And we see that there's actually multiple versions of several characters. So it's like there's a lot of different timelines occurring at once. So why is she the only one that comes out of it? Because she doesn't move to any specific room. Like she just randomly crawls into a room. Crazy cannibal dude who's old now with a bunch of wristwatches from all the Jerrys he's murdered, crawls in. His one of his watches hits the time, like the 6:06:59, and then the cube just turns off, and she's the only one left.
Yeah.
And it turns out that it's like an experiment to prove something.
It's a tesseract, and so I have two things I want to break down here. But first is her. Because she gets out, and then there's army guys.
Yeah.
And they're like, did you do it? And then the reveal is like she has a chip that she got off of the hacker lady, the blind lady. Mm-hmm. And she's like, here you go. And they're like, we'll run that through, see if we get anything from it. And then they shoot her in the head.
Right. So it's like if the whole thing was to get the hacker lady's pendant, you're the army. You already kidnapped her. Just take it off her neck.
Exactly.
Why the fuck did you put her in this magic machine?
That's the first question is what?
That's one of the big mistakes of this movie, to me, is explaining who's behind the cube.
Right.
Or rather trying to explain who's behind it. Because they don't explain it.
Because again, if they had focused on let's make a movie about solving puzzles, but instead they went the other way and they're like, you know how at the end of the first cube they didn't show what was outside the cube? That seems like it might have been some sort of point, but I think it's bullshit. Let's do the opposite. Let's focus only on what's outside the cube and talk only about who's doing this and then show it and create this elaborate lore to explain it. And the lore makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. Like, why would they put her through that machine? Why would they put anyone in there? What were they trying to prove?
Well, okay, so here's the first thing is, was she aware the whole time? Was she a secret agent, essentially?
That's the implication, yes.
So she was pretending to be scared, even in scenes where she was alone.
She definitely didn't know what the code was.
Right. So
because they congratulate her on figuring it out.
Right. So if the mission was, we need the pendant, we need the chip that this hacker has. You already pointed out they kidnapped her and put her in the cube. Not sure why they didn't just also search her for the thing that was around her neck.
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense.
None of it makes any sense.
Their plan
is baffling, and I'm reading there's an alternate ending.
Oh, I'm sure I'm surprised there's only one.
And the alternate ending doesn't make things any more clear. Because in the alternate ending, it is revealed to Kate that she was in the Hypercube for just 6 minutes and 59 seconds. It was an experiment used for quantum teleportation.
Okay.
Why would this be the way you test quantum teleportation?
Right.
Why would you do it?
The way you do anything?
Why would you do it with 8 people who don't know what they're doing?
Right.
Like, why? It would be a test pilot. Like, you'd put an astronaut in there or something who knew what the situation was.
Who knew what the situation was.
You wouldn't throw 8 people randomly into this quantum teleportation machine and just see what fucking happens.
Right. Also, why is the quantum teleportation machine also a puzzle? Like, why does it need to be an elaborate puzzle to get out? Why wouldn't it just be like, very clear set of instructions on what you're doing in there? But if you were trying to get this hacker's chip, one, you would just take it from her, but if you had to, for some reason, do the cube, why didn't they tell her how to get out if she's a double agent and she's working for him? Why does she also have to solve the cube?
Mm-hmm.
That doesn't make any sense.
Why is it a puzzle if you're testing quantum teleportation? Like, neither ending...
Why is it a puzzle if you're trying to steal this woman's chip, her hacker chip? Like, either way, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
there's no reason for it to be a puzzle.
It's really dumb.
Yeah, and the experiment... if for some reason this is like some Hunger Games situation where they're just creating a death cube, it's also important to point out that the only people who can actually participate in the puzzle are people who are personally connected to the creation of the cube.
It's like they wanted them
mathematics.
to be right. It's like they wanted them to be tangentially aware of some aspect of the cube. This movie doesn't make any fucking sense.
This is one of those things that happened in the first cube too.
It's the biggest mistake that movies like this make.
Yeah,
which is we don't need to know what the source of this is.
Right.
Like,
I would say
sometimes the unknown is fine.
Right. Even Cube 1 did this, but they did it better, is that they knew they needed exposition on how the cube worked. Like in Cube 1, someone needed to know, there's a shell and it moves around, that's how we get out, right?
Yeah, that was a reveal though, but yeah.
Yeah, but there's one guy in there who's like, I worked on the exterior of this. And like it's like a little sweaty, but like it seems like they did that even more now, where all the people in here were connected with,
but not in a thoughtful way. Like everybody in the first movie was conceivably there. The idea behind the assembled group in the first movie was that if they all worked together, they could solve it.
Right, and again, not the fact that it was the point of the cube in the first one was it's a puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. In this, the point of the cube seems to be some sort of government thing, or some sort of jail, or some sort of recon.
Literally, all it is to wait until a certain time.
Yes.
That's it.
And it's useless. My point is that it's useless, because in the first cube, it's useless too, but we don't know why it exists. It could be... the only thing the cube isn't useless as is some kind of scientific experiment on the people in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this one, we now kind of rule that out. So it's a question of like, what is the purpose of this cube if the only people you can put in it have to be math geniuses and connected with the creation of the cube?
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise it's not a puzzle, it's just a jail that kills you. And you can just make that without fucking bending time and space.
Right, and like the crazy guy is there because he's a private detective who is hired to find this missing woman who is a woman who works for the defense contractor that built the cube. And then we find out that she's inside the cube. So it's like, why did they throw her in there? Because we see her like 10 minutes from the end of the movie. So why did they throw one of their own employees into the cube? Why did they throw this sweaty, maniacal private detective into the cube? Because
why are they doing anything?
He has no skills to offer.
Why is a defense contractor making this puzzle?
I have
cube?
no idea. It does. Yeah, it's this whole movie is stupid.
Yeah. Again, the only thing a puzzle cube could possibly solve is A, it's either an elaborate like Hunger Games situation, or B, it has to do with the people in the cube and like the psychological experiment of it, right? Or in the case of the Maze Runner, which isn't a good movie, they like need to like keep their adrenaline up or something so that they can solve virus. It doesn't. Maze Runner's not a good film, so I'm not holding it up as like a better example. But like that's the whole thing. Is cube. The point of the cube shouldn't ever be known. But if it had to be known, it would have to be about the people in the cube, which it clearly isn't.
Right.
In this version.
It would be like, I don't know, aliens built it to test human ingenuity and find like the smartest humans.
Right.
Like
yeah,
a last Starfighter kind of deal.
Yeah, where the idea is like you put a bunch of humans in this cube, and then the ones that pop out are the ones that you want.
Yeah, those are the ones you want. Yeah, exactly. But like, just randomly throwing these people in here who are tangentially connected to the defense contractor, and then like the quote unquote traps that manifest in this film are a wall of time.
Yep.
Knives of time.
Knives of time, yep.
And a giant buzzsaw of time.
Yep.
And none of those things are ever explained.
Yeah, and they're all like crystal clear in CGI.
Yeah, there's some terrible CGI in this film.
Yes. Because they didn't want to do the work.
Yeah.
They're like, look, we're going to build this cube set, and then everything else will be done in post.
There's bad CGI in the first cube, but you accept it because the whole movie has kind of this grungy feel.
Yeah.
Like this movie very notably swaps that out for a sterile white luminescent cube.
Yes.
Whereas the first movie looked like a Tool music video.
Yeah, and I don't mind that new look if there was a
purpose behind it.
If there was a purpose, which I guess okay. Well, I haven't watched Cube Zero, but here is the most sense I can give this movie. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready for you to do the movie's work for it.
Yeah. The first cube wasn't made by the government. It was in fact alien in nature or it was discovered from somewhere else. What we're seeing in this movie is the government somehow found the cube technology and are now working it out themselves, the purpose of which isn't to do anything but figure out the cube. Meaning that it's like the movie Contact or something like that, where it's like we found this cube and now the government's trying to figure out what the purpose of the cube is as well. And they're putting people in because they know that's the ingredients the cube needs. And the reason it looks all sparkly is because it's the government's version of the cube. That is the most sense I can give this movie. And honestly, I think that's the only way you could have done a movie where it's from the point of view of what is the cube, if you actually did this sequel not in the cube. If it was from the point of view of the government trying to figure out what the cube was.
Right. Like, yeah, like that's okay. I'm about to level some praise on the Hostel series, so buckle up.
Okay.
But like Hostel, is from the point of view of the people who are trapped in the torture rooms. The point of view of Hostel 2 switches to the people who are purchasing them for torturing, because that's the natural evolution of the sequel, right?
Right. You have to change it somehow.
Yeah, you wouldn't just do the same thing again. You'd be like, well, what else can I do with this idea?
Or you do the same thing, but in a different, better way.
Sure,
like,
yeah.
If Cube 2 just had cooler puzzles, I'd be like, fuck it.
I mean,
it's still not a great movie.
Right.
But
Again, there are plenty of sequels that just do the same thing the first movie did, but with like different, like you just make a second cube that just has different traps or something.
Right.
But like, I appreciate it when a movie tries to expand on the idea of the original, and I like the idea of a cube that exists in 4 dimensions, the 4th dimension being time. And,
Me too.
And that you're wrestling with a mechanism that alters time and reality. But this movie is so poorly done, and they just I can't stress enough that all this movie is the characters wandering aimlessly from room to room.
Right.
That's all this movie is.
if you think about it in terms of a slasher film, slasher films will have sequels that are pretty much the same film.
Yeah.
But what they do is they say, how can we make the deaths cooler?
Yeah.
How can we make it? So if the first Cube, essentially the equivalent of the deaths is the puzzles. And instead of making a sequel and saying, how do we make the puzzles cooler? This is the equivalent of a slasher film being like, let's spend 2 hours exploring just who is this guy? Who's this killer? This Michael Myers. Let's really explore his life.
Yeah.
And
also,
it's like, don't care about that. That's actually part of the mystery is fun.
Yeah.
And there's not a single death or cool death in it. That's what it is they just
right, like that's
focused on the wrong thing.
I'm glad you brought up Michael Myers, because that's like a big failing of the Michael Myers franchise is they decided to try and explain him, and then it becomes this elaborate mythology of like Sam Hain and devils and like a
and
cult
his daughter and like
and a spirit and shit. And it's like, no, it was better when he was just a dude who was just a murderer for no reason.
Right.
Just a hollow shell of a man that's just a murderer. There's and that's, in fact, that's the entire point of John Carpenter's original movie, is that there is no reason for him. He just is.
Right. Yeah. He's the shape.
He's the shape. Yeah.
It's just, and they went entirely in the wrong direction here. Or they had to really lean into that, like I said, and like Hostel 2 just completely changed the game.
Right. Yeah. It should have been from the point of view of the people outside the cube.
Yeah.
I think that would have been interesting. But yeah, comparing this to a slasher movie, just to give you an idea of this movie's pace, if you guys haven't watched it, the first major character death does not happen until nearly an hour into the film.
Yeah.
Like, that's how slow. Like, somebody dies right up front, but it's a guy we don't really know, and he says like 3 lines.
Right.
The first major character death is Jerry, and that happens at like the 50-minute mark. Like, it's well into the movie before somebody actually dies.
Ghost knives.
Yeah, he gets ghost buzzsawed by this tesseract.
It's not even a very good death.
It's very badly animated. It looks like a video game cutscene from the PlayStation era.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Going back to this, I feel like we touched on it. Beat by beat, like scene by scene, this movie's just bad.
It's every single scene is bad.
My favorite line sequence, by the way, is one character near the beginning says, "Have we been kidnapped?" And someone says, "Now that's a really good question." And it's like, is it?
Yes, we have.
That's not a good question at all. That's the one thing you know the answer to.
Right, that's the only question you have the definitive answer to is, yes, we have all been abducted.
Yeah. Are you asking if you came here willingly?
Yeah, like,
you know the answer to that.
The woman in the dress who turns out to be an LA entertainment lawyer who also represents a defense contractor because this screenwriter's just making things up.
It's
the first line she says when they come into her room and wake her up is, she says, "What's wrong?" Like, she wakes up out of her stupor and says, "What's wrong?" to a room of strangers. Waking up in a strange place, she says, What's wrong?
It's just, they just threw words at the page.
And there's one thing that really bugged me about the filmmaking of it is they do a legitimately cool filmmaking trick the first time that you realize the gravity can be changed in each room. Like, it starts out as a level shot with the nerd guy climbing through it, and then he falls and the camera tilts to show you how the gravity's oriented. Does that make? Can you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, it's like he's crawling through. It's like he's crawling through a hatch, and it's a normal shot, like the hatch is in the middle of a wall, and then all of a sudden he's falling, so his legs are stretched out towards the camera like he's hanging, and the camera rotates so that he's hanging from the ceiling, if you guys can picture what I'm saying. And that was cool. But they do that like 3 or 4 more times where they rotate the camera when characters are walking into the room, to the point where you're like, oh, I bet this is a gravity shift. And it's not. It never is again. So it's like, why did you do that? And then not realize what you did.
This is a weird aspect is, again, this was directed by a director of photography who is also the DP of this film. So you would expect it to at least be visually interesting.
Right, like in that shot that I described, he clearly understood why they were doing that. But then like for the rest of the movie, they rotate the camera just because it looks cool.
Yeah. Well, here's my guess is that the DP DP/director couldn't care less about this film and was just like, I'm going to do things. I'm going to do a bunch of camera tests. This is me doing camera tests, the movie.
Like it was just so striking because that shot like punches you in the face. Like it's like, oh, like it's a really well filmed shot. Yeah. And there's clear intent and purpose behind it. So much so that the next time that the camera tilted as a character was climbing into a room, I was like, oh, the gravity's shifting because the movie has told me this is what this is. But nope. Like, my God. It was like, you did the thing. Like, you clearly understand that that's what this is telling us.
Right.
This movie is so bad. This is such like a half-assed, slapped-together movie.
I mean, who would have thought that Cube 2, Hypercube, was bad?
I mean, I'm going to take the bold stance that Cube never needed a sequel.
Yeah,
it's not a perfect film, but like
I think most of America.
Yeah,
like I remember when this came out, I was like, I'm going to stop you right there, Cube. This is not something I need.
I watched it because I was excited to watch it. I was like, oh shit, they made another Cube. Let's see what this is, and like it sucked. It sucked so much I never watched it again until today. Whereas I've seen the first one a handful of times. Like I was saying, it's not a perfect movie, but it's really unique and interesting. And this movie is none of those things.
None of those things.
Why make a sequel to this movie if you don't have any ideas? Like you had one idea. You had one idea about the fourth dimension in a 4-dimensional cube, and then you fucked it completely up. Like, you made the most boring ass movie out of that idea.
This is, by the way, what happened with The Matrix, right? Because The Matrix was clearly a movie that was supposed to just be one standalone film.
Right. I think we talked about it. Actually, we may have talked about this as friends and not on a podcast. Imagine that. But the first Matrix ends with Neo flying. So that's like, well, where do you go from there? Like that's the perfect way to end this film. It's like, oh fuck, he's the master of this world now.
Yeah, exactly. He's going to save the world. And I think what happened was the Wachowskis were probably at one point told, look, there's going to be more of these. You can either be in control of that or not. And they decided, okay, well, let's give it a shot, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, they clearly love like mythology and world building.
Exactly.
But
and
it's also clear that they didn't intend for it to be sequelized.
I would argue that for all their faults, the Matrix sequels were as good as they possibly could be.
I guess.
Because of this reason. Because there was nowhere to go.
Right.
So they were like, I guess this will do war and everything.
And they do the things that I just talked about. Where it's like they do both versions of the sequel. They do a sequel where it's like, where let's just do the first one, but do it more, which is The Matrix Reloaded. And then they're like, well, let's do it from the other perspective outside The Matrix, which is The Matrix Revolutions. And they're both bad, but at least they tried.
At least they tried. Yeah. They sat down and they said, okay, you know what we haven't seen yet? A car chase in The Matrix. And it's like, yes, that is the right instinct. Mm-hmm. The movie, I would argue that the reason the Matrixes don't work is more because they're just very boring.
Right, like that car scene, for instance, to me is very dull. Like I remember seeing it in the theater and thinking it was boring.
Oh, I loved it.
And being like surprised at myself. I was like, I shouldn't be bored with this car chase, but I am. I guess it was because none of the characters are in danger because it's in the middle of the movie.
Yes. Also,
you're like, I don't care. This is just like superhero porn, like destruction porn.
Right. But yeah, Cube didn't do that. But
No.
I feel like it was another situation where whoever made Cube was told probably like, look, we're going to make more of these. And unlike the Wachowskis, the whoever made the cubes, I forget their name, was like, you know what? Go ahead. I'm going to go over here now.
Yeah, I don't know, because this is several years after the first Cube, and the writer-director was not involved.
Yep, it's right around when the Matrix sequels showed up.
So I feel like they probably came to that dude and asked them, do you want to do a Cube 2? And he's like, nah.
Did Dark City have a sequel?
No.
That's interesting. It must not have done good enough.
It did. It didn't do well.
Okay, because I'm now thinking, this is sort of the era of movies from the late 90s getting forced sequels. Something that we're all familiar with that happens now, too. But like The Crow as well. The Crow is a film that didn't need a sequel. And they're like, let's do more Crows.
I mean, The Crow, to be fair, The Crow got its first sequel in 1996.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Crow
mind.
City of Angels is 96.
I'll also argue that The Crow is actually the more likely, or the more, because The Crow is basically a superhero, and you can make tons of those.
Right, you can keep doing that movie.
But yeah, that's why I just was like, did they do this to Dark City as well? Did they make Dark City pitch black?
No, they never did.
Yeah, but that's only because it didn't do good enough.
Directed by the same dude that directed The Crow, incidentally.
Oh yeah,
Alex
and
Proyas.
iRobot.
Yeah,
don't forget iRobot. The woman who played the old woman in this is named after Commissioner Gordon's daughter.
Her name's Barbara Gordon.
Yeah,
I don't. That's interesting.
Yeah, I assume she's not named after. Like,
no,
the actress
she was an old lady in 2002, so she must have been born before Barbara Gordon was created.
Sure, that's fair. She's still kicking. She was in The Boys recently.
Oh, who'd she play?
Judy Atkinson. I don't know. It looks like just one episode. I don't know. She's in a bunch of stuff. I hope. I'm kind of happy. Like, she's not great in this movie, but I also the acting in Cube 2 is some of it's just it's all bad. It's all bad. But what I was gonna say is, I wonder if a lot of the actors were just like, look, I don't care. Like, because the writing isn't good.
The writing's bad. The main character's trying her best. Jerry is fine. Like, he's probably the best actor in it.
Yeah.
But he also has the clearest character. Like, everybody, like I said, every other character is so inconsistent that I can't fully blame the actors, because they're not really given anything. They're like, well, what is my character?
That's what I mean. Yeah.
I don't know what your character is. Okay, how the fuck do I play that?
And looking at their careers, it's varied. Because, again, yeah, there's no indication in this movie of what kind of actors they'll be, because the lines that they're dealing with are such just absolute bullshit.
Right, and the characters themselves have no internal consistency.
Oh, here's a fun fact. The shitty, the dude who fucks to death.
Yeah, the computer programmer.
He played a 10th grader in Billy Madison.
Oh, okay.
So, good for him.
I assume that's one of the kids that Billy beats up?
I don't know. He was also in The English Patient as a young Canadian soldier. So, like, his career's a bit...
Yeah, he looks like discount Topher Grace.
Yes, he looks very Toffee. You hate him immediately. Like, he's got a face where I'm like, oh, I hate that man. And nothing against him. Nothing. I bet he's a very nice guy. I don't know. But he was born with hate face.
Yeah, it's the guy from Mad Men.
Yeah, Pete Campbell.
He's a real Pete Campbell.
Where, like, I'm sure the first thing he was told in, like, acting school was like, look, you're going to be a villain in everything.
Listen, you're going to be a weasel in every movie because you just have that look. Nothing against you. But make it work for you.
Yeah. Embrace it and you'll make all the money.
Yeah. You'll be in 100 movies. You could be Xander Berkeley.
Yeah. Yes. It's going to the Xander Berkeley School of Acting like a sleaze.
You look like a real scumbag, so just lean into it.
The Xander Berkeley Academy of Evil Stepfathers.
One of their highest profile graduates is Jason Clarke.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Jason Clarke definitely went to the Xander Berkeley School of Acting.
Oh, 100%. Oh, what did we watch? Cube 2.
Fucking Cube 2, I guess.
Yeah. Great film. Everybody see it.
Yeah, watch it immediately. Or don't. I don't care what you do.
Yeah, I mean, it gives you something to hate.
Yeah.
You know?
Something we need.
We all
in
need
these
that
trying
right
times.
Yeah. Any other final thoughts on Cube 2?
No, absolutely not.
All right. Thank you, Burrito Mouth. Thank you. I expect Cube 0.
Thank you,
and that's fine.
Burrito Ma.
Burrito Ma. Let's finish it up. Let's get through the Cube series. You know? It's the only way I'm going to watch these things.
We could, yeah, sure.
I'm going to quickly Google Cube 0. See what it's about. It's about a cube.
I mean, that's a real surprise.
Yeah, there's people in the cube. I don't care. It does revert. Okay. It reverts to the original idea of the set. So that's cool. It's like the
and it is. We also do see the point of view of the people monitoring the cube. There you go.
Yeah. Okay. I have one good thing to say about the cube. This cube. 90 minutes. Just like the first one.
I mean, it's a long 90 minutes, but yeah.
Yeah, but they weren't like, let's stretch it out. Same with Cube 0. 90 minutes. God bless them for knowing that much.
Yeah, let's get in and get out.
We're only going to make the bare minimum movie. We don't need to fucking stretch this out for people.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's happy to be sitting here watching Cube 2.
Yeah, nobody wants this.
Yeah. All right. So, thanks for listening, everybody.
Yeah, that's enough.
Yeah, I hope you're all in one piece. I hope you're doing all right.
Mm-hmm.
If you're, I don't know, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/gamefullyunemployed. If you haven't already, we have some exclusive podcasts on there, like Tom and Jeff Watch Batman, and Fox Mulder is a Maniac. Might be a good distraction. And that's it.
That's pretty much it. Yeah, we also have a store at tpublic.com/store/gamefullyunemployed where you can get t-shirts, masks, mugs, stickers, posters, all kinds of things. Check it out, or don't. I don't know.
Who can say? Let's all get in a cube.
Yeah, honestly, I'd feel safer in a cube right now.
I could really go for a cube.
We're
right
all
around
essentially in our own cubes. We just need traps.
If I woke up in a cube right now, I'd be like, ooh.
I'd be like, oh, thank God.
Yeah,
At last.
I'm gonna immediately go to cannibal.
I'm gonna eat this guy Jerry. He looks delicious.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He must have been.
I guess.
He kept eating them, and he was like his preferred choice.
Yeah.
Jerry meat.
Prime
Sweet.
Jerry cuts.